In recent episodes, you've heard me talk about a multipolar world order that is emerging. A world order in which the United States is no longer the single dominant power. It's no longer a unipolar world, but rather you've got multiple loci or locuses of power. And in some senses, you're seeing two blocks emerge. I don't know if it's quite right to call it the Western and the Eastern bloc. That's the old terminology of the Cold War, but it kind of is, because think about it. The Western bloc would be the United States and largely Europe, and the Eastern bloc would be China and Russia, both of which are Eastern. China is most certainly Eastern. Russia straddles the East and the West. And but it's a little bit of a mixed up picture. Brazil appears to be inclining right now toward the Eastern Bloc, even though it isn't the Western Bloc. There are obviously leftist regimes in Cuba and Venezuela, and they obviously are not on the American side. Now, what would this multipolar order look like? It turns out that the Chinese and Putin are both coming up with a sort of a recipe. And the recipe is deeply misleading for a reason that I want to outline here today. So the recipe that is outlined, and Putin recently gave a speech, and he said it very clearly. He goes, this is the principle, the guiding principle of the new multipolar order. Quote, the possibility for any nation, any society, any civilization to choose their own way, their own socio-political system. Now, this is the principle of non-intervention. It's a principle that is based upon, you could say, self-determination, because it tells countries, look, it's not Russia's job or China's job to tell you to be this kind of society or that kind of society, to have a capitalist economy or a socialist economy, to legalize gay marriage or not legalize it. That's not our business. That's your business. You handle it. And our job is to respect your sovereignty and to deal with you on the basis that the existing form of government that you have is a legitimate one and is the true representative of your country. So right there, in that second part of what I said, lies, I would argue, the problem. Now, you can see what Putin and China are doing. They're trying to contrast with the, I would argue, clumsy leftist brutishness of the Biden regime, which is to go to countries and try to strong-arm them and bully them into adopting Western systems and adopting Western leftist cultural mores. So not adopting traditional America or the traditional American culture or American values, which, by the way, are congruent with many of the values of people around the world, but rather to adopt trans propaganda, LGBTQ orthodoxy, liberalize their abortion laws. All of this stuff is being, I think, recklessly pushed by the Biden regime for ideological reasons, and other countries are balking, and the Chinese and Russians are saying, we won't do that. And you can see why that's appealing to many countries in Asia and Africa and South America, countries like India, which would normally be more inclined toward America and are still wavering in terms of their commitment to the sort of Chinese-Russian alliance, but are tempted to it for this reason. We won't interfere in your internal affairs. Now, the reason this seems compelling is that it seems the most fundamental right of any group of people, any society, is to shape its own destiny. So what Xi and what Putin are saying makes a lot of sense to a lot of people. But here's the problem. The problem is that no society has unanimity on its own future direction. In every society, and look at our own society as a classic example, obviously, if we had our way, the policies that drive America, both internally and in foreign policy, would be completely different than the policies that the Biden people are pushing. So even in America, if someone were to say, well, we are going to respect American sovereignty, and therefore we're not going to interfere in anything that America decides, Biden could become a tyrant. Biden could, Biden is already moving in that direction, but he could suspend our civil liberties. He could declare martial law, and he could claim to speak for all Americans, which he wouldn't. But nevertheless, the Putin-Xi principle is, well, that's okay. That's because you're the president of the country. You get to decide what the whole country is and what its direction is. So that's the problem, is it defers the definition of where a country wants to go to the ruling regime. So think about the practical impact of that. If you live in Saudi Arabia, the Saudi royals become the automatic, unquestioned spokesman, if you will, spokespeople for the country. If you live in Iran, even though we know there's a lot of dissent in Iran, there's a lot of people, that's why they don't have fair elections. If the mullahs actually were immensely popular, they could run free elections and win every time. They wouldn't need to pre-select their candidates. The reason they do those things is because they know that there is a powerful well of discontent, difficult to measure because you can't get accurate polls and they don't really have elections. And then come to the CCP in China. They're presumed to be the legitimate spokesman for the people of China. Well, have the people of China said that? Have they decided that? Have they voted that? No. So basically what I'm saying is that Putin's formula and Xi's formula is a justification for tyranny. It allows all the tyrants of the world to sit tight. Not only that, it goes even further than that, because it allows the tyrants of the world to treat anybody who is an internal dissident, Russia itself is a classic example of this, as being a pawn of the enemy, as being a pawn of the West. Hey, I, Putin, am speaking for Russia, and so Russian dissidents are somehow in concert with the West. They are enemies of the state. So what I'm getting at is the multipolar order would be more defensible if it were articulated in different terms. But the way that Putin and Xi are pushing it, it's not an order that we can look forward to.